always known you're different from other men, haven't you? Not better, not worse, just different. Like you're operating on a frequency no one else can hear. You tried to fit in, you performed normalcy, you learned the scripts, but deep down, you've always felt like an outsider looking in, and you thought something was wrong with you, that you were broken, that you needed fixing. But what if you're not broken at all? What if what the world calls your flaw is actually your calling? This channel is for the man who stayed strong when no one noticed, the man who carried responsibility, quietly and slowly disappeared. Here, strength is questioned, silence is exposed, and the cost of being the strong one is finally spoken out loud. Let me show you why you've always felt different, what that difference actually means, and why the thing that's isolated you your entire life might be the very thing that sets you free. You were different as a child. While other kids played without thinking, you were thinking while you played. While they accepted everything adults told them, you questioned. While they fit into groups naturally, you watched from the outside wondering how they did it. And adults noticed. They said you were too serious, too quiet, too sensitive, too intense. They told you to lighten up, to be more like the other kids, to stop thinking so much. So you tried. You learned to laugh at things that weren't funny. You learned to pretend you cared about things that felt meaningless. You learned to hide the parts of yourself that made people uncomfortable, and it worked. Sort of. You could pass as normal if you concentrated, but it was exhausting, and you always knew you were performing. Then you became an adult, and you thought maybe now, finally, you'd find your people. You'd find men who saw the world the way you did. Men who thought deeply, men who felt intensely, men who questioned everything, but you didn't find them. Instead, you found men talking about sports you didn't care about. Men bonding over beers and superficial banter. Men performing masculinity in ways that felt hollow to you. And you tried to join. You went to the gatherings. You attempted the small talk. You forced yourself to care about things you didn't care about. But you left every interaction feeling more alone than before you arrived. Because being around people who don't see you is lonelier than being actually alone. So you stopped. Trying, not dramatically, just gradually. You declined invitations. You stopped forcing connections. You withdrew into yourself. And people noticed. They called you antisocial, aloof, arrogant. They said you thought you were better than everyone. But that wasn't it at all. You just couldn't pretend anymore. Carl Jung spent his entire life studying men like you, and he discovered something most people never understand. What the collective calls abnormal, what society labels as broken, might actually be a sign of something deeper, not pathology, but calling. Jung called it individuation, the psychological and spiritual process of becoming who you actually are instead of who the collective expects you to be. Most men never individuate. They adopt the persona the world gives them. They perform the masculine role society scripted. They live their entire lives as copies of an archetype they never questioned, and they're comfortable. Because the collective rewards conformity. It gives you belonging, acceptance, a clear identity. All you have to do is stop being yourself. But some men can't do that, not because they're stronger, not because they're braver, but because something in them refuses to pretend. These are the men called to individuation, the men who feel different, the men who don't fit, the men who've spent their entire lives feeling like they're on the outside of a party they were never actually invited to. And here's what Jung understood that most therapists miss: that feeling of not fitting in. It's not a disorder to medicate, it's a call to answer. You feel different because you are different. You're being called to a path most men will never walk. The path of becoming yourself, fully, authentically, without apology. But here's the cost. Individuation requires solitude, because you can't become yourself while performing for the collective. You can't discover your authentic nature while hiding it to fit in. So the men called to this path experience isolation, not as punishment, but as preparation. The loneliness you've felt your entire life wasn't evidence you were doing something wrong. It was the space required for you to do something right. Become yourself. Let me show you the signs that you're one of these men. The signs you've been called to individuation. First sign. You can't do shallow conversation. Small talk feels like sandpaper on your brain. You try to engage with surface-level topics, but something in you recoils. You need depth or silence. There's no middle ground. Other men bond over surface topics, sports, weather, work gossip, but you need to talk about meaning, purpose, truth, the things that actually matter. And most people aren't interested in going there. So you stay quiet. And they think you're awkward. But you're not awkward. You just refuse to waste energy on conversations that go nowhere. Second sign. You see patterns others miss. Connections between things, underlying structures, hidden motivations. You see the game while everyone else is playing it unconsciously. And that perception isolates you. Because you can't unsee what you see. You can't participate in collective delusions everyone else accepts as reality. You're watching the Matrix while everyone else thinks the Matrix is real. Third sign. You need time alone to function, not because you hate people, but because being around people depletes you. Every interaction requires energy, managing perceptions, performing normalcy, hiding intensity. So you need solitude to recover, to drop the mask, to be yourself without monitoring how you're being received. And people don't understand that. They think solitude means you're lonely, but you're not lonely in solitude. You're recovered. Fourth sign. You've been called weird, intense, too serious, too deep your entire life. And you believed them. You thought something was wrong with you. So you tried to fix it. Lighten up. Be more fun. Stop thinking so much. But you couldn't maintain it. Because it wasn't you. And performing something you're not is exhausting. Fifth sign. You feel like you're living a double life. The version you show the world. And the version you are when no one's watching. And those two versions are so different you don't even recognize one as the other. The public version is managed, careful, acceptable. The private version is raw, intense, authentic. And you've spent so much energy maintaining the public version that you're not even sure who the private version is anymore. If these signs describe you, you're not broken. You're being called. So what do you do with this? How do you walk the path of individuation when everything in society tells you to conform? First, you stop trying to fix yourself. You're not broken. You're different. And different isn't defective. The world will try to normalize you. Therapists will try to make you more social. Friends will try to get you to loosen up. Family will worry you're not happy. But their concern is based on the assumption that fitting in equals health. And for men called to individuation, that's not true. Second, you embrace the solitude, not as exile, but as requirement. You need time away from the collective to discover who you are beneath the conditioning. That's not antisocial, that's essential. Jung said the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. For men called to individuation, that cave is solitude, and the treasure is yourself. Third, you find the few, not the many. The few, the other men on this path, they're rare, but they exist. And one deep connection with someone who sees you is worth 1,000 shallow connections with people who don't. Fourth, you stop performing. Stop pretending to care about things you don't care about. Stop laughing at things that aren't funny. Stop forcing yourself into spaces that deplete you. Your energy is limited. Stop wasting it on maintaining a version of yourself that isn't real. Fifth, you trust the path. Individuation isn't comfortable. It requires walking away from collective approval. It requires standing alone. It requires being misunderstood. But on the other side of that, you find something most men never access. Yourself. If everything I just described felt uncomfortably accurate, you're not imagining it. You've always known you're different, and now you know why. Drop the word "seen" in the comments if you recognize yourself in this pattern. Your isolation among men isn't proof of inadequacy. It's proof you're called to individuation, the journey of becoming who you actually are instead of who others expect you to be. You're not walking this path alone. There are other men who understand this journey. And this channel is where we gather. This is a space for the solitary man, the observer, the thinker, the man who lives at the edge of the forest while others gather in the village. Your difference isn't defect, it's depth. Comment seen below.